Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking through a premium tier list. This is as of August, and to be honest, I probably should have done it in July, but let's call it July anyways. This is the premium tier list, and I'm going to include the history collection because that is coming up at the moment. So this is more like a preemptive tier list just to see what I think will be, the top dogs in the meta come the BCS season. Obviously, this is not set in stone yet. The meta might shift a different way. People will start to, create like super wacky decks. So this is just something that is, shown on paper. This is what I think will be the best tier list. And come 3 months, 6 months later in the year, we're gonna look back at this to see how much of it is right. If you guys need any coaching, feel free to hit me up on Metafy. My link is in the bottom right-hand corner and in the description. Feel free to hit me up and we'll get the session going. So we're gonna start with some of the decks that haven't changed. So for example, Dark Irregulars. Dark Irregulars has always been that deck, the NLK deck. Nothing really changed, right? Shahara doesn't boost the deck. The new Stride doesn't really boost the deck either. NLK is still NLK. We did get the new VPR, so I think that will boost the consistency of the deck. But overall, it's still going to be NLK deck, unfortunately, and that's just how it is. So I think Dark Irregulars is still, one of these super strong decks in the meta, and it will be, for a long time until, Dark Irregulars get a new gimmick. The deck is just really, really explosive. If you're not careful, you might just get rolled. So Gear Chronicle. So Gear Chronicle still has the ride down, but I think now that it has access to the normal jet, I actually think it is really, really strong. The fact that normal jet can stride into Lost Maker, which essentially creates 2 force markers, being able to multi-tack on the 2 force circles straight away, it's just so strong. And the fact that you get 2 force markers while your opponent is just sitting there and you unlock GB, that means like all your time leap stuff starts working. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy. So I think Gear Chronicle is one of the best decks come the next format, and it's just really, really strong. Bermuda Triangle. So Bermuda Triangle was a really good deck in, I guess, the ride down meta, and I think it's still good. So the thing about Bermuda is that if you're versing a lot of these like ride down decks, right, then you're probably going to be like the best ride down deck anyways. And if people don't play the ride down decks and start playing the G stuff, then they're riding up first and they're getting, force markers or whatever, and you're still getting your force, you're going into Helltride and smacking them anyways, right? Now Bermuda, if it goes first, now it doesn't need to run all these ride down stuff, and you probably will, but at a lower quantity. So, your Yuika is probably the most important, Miyatoa, like all of these Soul Blast stuffs, Justine, you might start cutting those and freeing up those slots for more impactful cards, that generate you advantage the moment that you ride up to grade 3 and just push your opponent, right? The moment that they get to 4 damage, then it gets very, very hard for them to kind of recoup back, and you might just kill them on on your first Helltrotter stride. So I think Bermuda is really, really strong, and a lot of people are discounting it. I think it is a deck that you guys need to test for the BCS season, and who knows? I might be wrong, but I still think Bermuda is still a formidable deck. And it just has everything that Highlander kind of wants. And as sets release, obviously we have the Halloween set coming out for Lyrical that might show a bit more promise. But I think Bermuda is really, really strong. Aqua Force. So this one's a little bit weird. So Thavas in the history collection, I don't know about it, to be honest. Like, I just feel that it's missing something. It's like in a middle ground between a ride down deck and a really explosive, like, ride up Thavas deck that utilizes the tidal ball. So I'm not too sure. I think it's like high B, low A. And I think that, it's probably better than the average benchmark, right? And it still has ride down. It still is very explosive. You can still generate multiple excels, which is really strong. And a lot of your like pursuit assaults and stuff is just really fat, right? But if you're playing G Thavas, the deck actually changes because now you're opening up like some of the older stuff, like Saber Flow, and you still can use Prod Pollen, a lot of the new stuff as well that generate tokens. So I'm actually not too sure. I feel that it's kind of like here maybe at the end. So I'm going to give it a bit of respect, and I'm going to put it at the end of A. I think that's a, formidable place to be, and yeah, we'll just leave it at that. Granblue, I think Granblue is really strong, and I actually think it's probably one of the best decks. It is so versatile now. One of the problems that I had before was that when you ride up to grade 3, it was just, trying to farm a ghost ship. Now you can stride, start calling stuff, and, start attacking, right? Start generating an advantage, and you don't really care because you just play the one Night Rose in your deck and then you mill it off like a Colombard or something, right? So Granblue itself, I think, is very, very dynamic, very flexible in what it can do. And I think the best Granblue players in the world, like Solemn, like Kelvin Galini, like all these guys know Granblue in and out. These guys are going to innovate this deck and it will just shine. So I actually expect to see a lot of Granblues top and probably, win these regionals come BCS season. But, we'll have to wait and see. So yeah, that's pretty much like the higher end stuff. So let's take a look at something like Megacolony. Megacolony, I think, is a meta call. And Darkface itself is Soul Blast 2 to rest 1. Megacolony is alright. I think it just kind of goes... I don't want to really put it in A. I think it's a B deck, but it's the highest of the B. Because if your meta is super superior calling and everything is not placed from hand, then Megacolony actually becomes very good, right? Because you're countering all these superior call decks, right? So I think Megacolony being in B is a nice gateway point where it can be very good or it can be very bad, right? If the meta is full of Bermuda or Narukami or stuff that call from hand, then Megacolony actually becomes really bad. But then it's the other way around as well. If it's super superior calling, then it becomes really good, right? So I think as the meta develops, this deck actually goes up or goes down or just stays as it is, right? It is very meta based, right? It is, it depends on what the meta just kind of evolves into. So I'm just gonna put it at B for now. It probably will increase to A later on in the year because we then flesh out what the format is like, what people are playing, and yeah, that's just pretty much how it is. Something like Narukami, I think Narukami is very strong. With the Vanquisher, now you can get 2 XL straight up with Zorus and then transition into something like a sweep command. You can even play Vowing Saber, and I think the dynamics of Narukami is really, really strong. If all of these XL decks are really strong, then that means that Exterminate becomes stronger. So Narukami itself, you can still, full Bronto or whatever. So I think Narukami has a really good package going for it. You just slap in 4 Vanquishers, the G Vanquishers, and then slap in 2 Zorus, and you're pretty happy, right? So now that you don't, if you're playing a normal Vanquisher deck, you don't ride up to the V Vanquisher anymore. You go up to the G1, stride, create 2 XLs, and then just slap your opponent and then start transitioning into a sweep or a vowing or something like that, right? So I think Narukami is a very strong deck coming into this next format, and it has always been a strong deck, so I don't think it's going to change. I think the deck is very, very formidable. Link Joker. This one's a bit weird. So Messiah now gets 2 Force Generators, and I think with Volko, it's pretty strong. You also have now access to a faster Integral. So I think the deck itself is a good solid A deck. I think it becomes a time bomb deck, so if decks can't beat Link Joker in time, then it's going to be a problem, right? Because it gets to Integral just, morphing jars your hand back to 5, and then you literally can't guard anything because everything is just so strong. It also has access to the Crest, and also that's probably why GC is at the top, because it has access to the Crest as well. So Crest Gear Chronicle, Crest Messiah, I think that is very, very strong. So yeah, I think Link Joker kind of stays there. Something that I think is going to be very strong is Neo Nectar. Neo Nectar, there are some gimmicks with the deck where you can convert your Vanguard's name to be certain cards and whatever. And you also have access to, the Cray Elemental jump engine as well. And I think Neo Nectar itself has a lot of, you know, early game pressure because it has tokens, right? So Neo Nectar itself, I think, presents itself as a really good early game. And then if you jump to grade 3 and if your opponent is unaware of what your deck does, you might actually just steamroll them. Recently in the side event for, I think WGP Indonesia, Neo Nectar came first. So, you know, that is something that we have to kind of look forward to, just kind of see how the deck kind of evolves. But whether or not people will play this deck, I'm not actually too sure. So yeah, Neo Nectar kind of stays there. Something like Genesis, I think Genesis is really strong. So I'm going to put Aqua Force towards the end. Genesis is like a little bit higher. Regalia just stays the same. Regalia has been doing what it's doing that the G decks are doing now, right? Is riding up to, you know, Regalia name, going to Marduk, and it's pretty much doing exactly what the G stuff is doing. Sure, you get like one less Excel, but it doesn't really matter. It's a Vanguard centric deck. It is just really strong. Creates a lot of advantage, you know, Minerva swinging 3 times with a Norn, it's really, really strong. So I think Genesis itself, very formidable deck. The deck doesn't really change. And, you know, if you're experimenting with Fenrir, you have Marduk already, right? So there might not actually be a need for the new stuff, but, you know, all of these, you know, enthusiasts for Genesis like Mo will innovate on these decks. DP. So I think DP goes in B. DP hasn't really changed. The Grand Gallop support with the the History Collection Stride doesn't really change the deck much. I think the deck is just, you know, One Punch Man, and it still does what it does. Still Linkers, still Unibirds, and yeah, just 5 crit, 6 crit, 100 million crit at your opponent. That's pretty much what the deck does. Very linear, so I think there are a lot of adjustments that the top end decks can do to essentially prevent DP from, you know, steamrolling them. So yeah, that's DP. Something like Golds. I think Golds is pretty formidable, but I think it goes in the low A. I think Golds, if it's given to a player who knows how to build the deck inside and out, it can be very, very strong. It still has access to Percival. It has now the G Gurgit, and then you go into the History Collection Revamped Stride. You create 2 Excels, Percival creates 3. That's 3 Excels straight up, which is actually nuts. So yeah, you know, Gold Paladin is still good, and you can still transition into V Gurgit, do all your shenanigans, or you can even go into Ultima and just win from there. So I think Gold Paladin is very strong, but I think you kind of just have to wait to see how the meta develops, because only the, you know, dedicated gold players will play Gurgit at a really, really high level. Spike Brothers, I think Spike Brothers is very strong. Now that it gets, I guess, multiple force 1s on a circle, it makes multi-attack on that circle really strong. Once you transition into something like a Rising Nova, the V Rising Nova, then you get, you know, 2 more force on the other side, and then you can start to, you know, bounce. And Galley is a really, really strong stride. So I think it just kind of goes up to where it sat in the BCS season the Springfest season. So I think it's a very strong deck, very high A, on the brink of S, but I think there's just a very definitive line on what deck is S and what deck is A. Something like Shadows. Shadows didn't really benefit off the History Collection very much. There is like Raging Form, but I think Shadow Paladin is just your benchmark. I think it's just all right. The deck, I don't know, it didn't really improve much, and the deck just kind of stayed the same. So Raging Form is actually probably better than something like Luard, so probably look out for that. Claret Soul is just Luard light, kind of. I'm not actually too sure. I'm going to put it at a benchmark B, potentially even in C, but I'm going to give respect to Raging Form. I think that deck is a really strong deck. Now, Pale Moon. I think Pale Moon is A, but bottom of A. I think the deck, you kind of have to give it to someone who knows how to play it and knows how to play into every other deck, and you can't pick it up without, you know, fleshing out your matchup knowledge. And I think the deck itself is a very complex deck. Sure, you know, you give it to someone, you know, who is very well versed in Pale Moon, then they'll be able to play it. But I think The deck itself is lacking something. I'm not too sure what. I haven't actually really tested much because I've been testing for Pokemon Worlds. But yeah, I think it's just end of A, maybe top, like just top of B, I think. I think the deck is just alright. I think it's, I don't know. I'll have to see. I have to like play it to kind of know, but from face value, I just don't think that it's going much, to be honest. Fine, I'll give it some respect. I'll put it at the bottom of A, and yeah, it's like the lowest of A. Like Aqua Force is way better. Tachikaze is definitely A. I think someone like Cardfight will innovate on this deck, will blow it up, and not a lot of people actually know about Tachikaze. So, you know, you still have the core Magnum Loop. The deck is just very aggressive. And you still have your equip gauge stuff. Now you have a Gaia that you can stride into an on-hit stride. So I think it's pretty formidable. Angel Feathers. I think... What do Angel Feathers get? Gabriel. I don't think 2 protects justifies it. I guess you have like Hamiel. But I don't know. You probably look at like something like Gize. And then like, yeah, but even then like Gize in a really aggressive meta is actually not very good. So I think Angel Feather kind of goes in C. It needs a lot more support for it to be really, really good. Great Nature, I think Great Nature is pretty good. With the new Big Belly, well not new Big Belly, but old Big Belly G going into the stride, now you can like plus a billion. It did lose Spangled. So maybe it goes in B. I think it might go there. Yeah, I think it might go in B. It's just a benchmark deck. Like decks in S and A, I would bring to like a regional. So yeah, I'm gonna put Great Nature in there. Kagero. What did Kagero get? Blade Master? Overlord? I don't know. I'm not feeling Kagero. I think Kagero needs a bit more love, I think. Overlord is good. Like, you can do like the damage exploder stuff, like Gabriel Tio's team. They brought a Kagero, and you can do like, you know, the damage exploder shenanigans. But I think it actually runs out of gas. But maybe that's just enough to kill your opponent straight up on grade 3. But if you're going second, you get aggroed, and yeah, you just feel really, really bad. So I think Kagero just kind of goes there. Yeah. It's just how it is. Royals. I think Royals is alright. It has Jewel Knights. I think Jewel Knights is pretty strong. But I think the Altmar stuff, yeah, it's... I don't know. There's definitely something missing with the Altmar stuff. So I wouldn't put Altmar in this category. I'd definitely talk about like Jewel Knights. Jewel Knights with Crystal Luster is still a strong deck, and you know, your ride up game is strong as well. You just ride up, bash a few times, G-Guard into a Crystal Luster, and then just absolutely smoke your opponent. So yeah, I think Royals is pretty formidable, still strong. Definitely a deck to consider for BCS as well. If you are, you know, a newer player, definitely a deck to pick up. Murakumo. So Murakumo got Yasue, but it still has a problem finishing the game. And what I mean by that is that it's still reliant on Shiryuki and the Shibaraku, you know, stuff, right? But I guess now one of the good things about Murakumo is that it can ride up, get 2 Excel straight up, go into a Shiryuki, and then clone stuff with the P collection stride. So the new stride. So that's maybe something like you can consider. I think Murakumo is still pretty solid. I wouldn't put it in S. I definitely put it in A, but I think it'd be like somewhere there. I think it's a formidable deck, definitely a deck that you have to test. And the problem with a lot of these decks is that Honolly is, you know, a factor you have to consider, right? So Murakumo actually dies pretty badly to something like a Honolly, which Granblue and, you know, Gears can utilize. Maybe not Gears, but like Granblue is flexible enough to like call out a Honolly and just stop your chain attacking, right? Kill out all your resources, and you really don't have much going for you. So yeah, Murakumo just kind of sits there. Nubatama. I actually think Nubatama is pretty strong. Just because now it has a write-up game and it still does what it does. You know, you still have your V Shunui Oboro, which goes into Soul, and then you essentially fulfill the cost for the discarding bird, Kojugarasu or whatever it's called, and a Mizukaze. So I think those are really strong. And then maybe you can even splash like G Shiranui into Hanzo. So I think that portion is really good. But you know, these Nubatama, you know, again, innovators, the people who finesse in Nubatama will find a way to break this deck. So I think, yeah, I think it's a pretty strong deck. It looks pretty strong, but maybe it doesn't go in S. Maybe it goes in like high A, just kind of sits there. And yeah, I think these three decks, it's a very definitive line between these three decks and the rest. Nova grabs, so that's like Victor. It still lacks it still has its old problem. The old problem is that it doesn't generate enough advantage early. You have to very heavily rely on Busted, and I think if you ride into G Victor and get 2 excels, it's still not going to cut it, right? So I'm actually not sure. I think Nova Grappler, a good benchmark deck, maybe on the brink of A. You know, if you're really good at Nova Grabs, then, you know, you're gonna, you know, skyrocket this deck, right? So I think, yeah, it just kind of sits there, very, very on the brink of A if, you know, someone can break the deck. OTT, I think OTT is pretty strong. Still does what it does with Battle Sisters. Still has Ichi, still has Popo, still does everything. And, you know, if you have G Susanoo, now you can start speeding up the deck a little. Get 2 protects, draw a bunch of cards. Yeah, I think that's, you know, pretty fair for like what OTT can do. And yeah, that's pretty much the History Collection premium tier list. This is what I think will kind of lead into the BCS season. This is what I think will happen, you know, during the early stages of BCS. I might be completely wrong. I might be, you know, a complete 180, completely wrong, and, you know, people are going to prove me wrong. So this is just what I see from face value, no testing at all. So yeah, this is pretty much what I see at the moment for the premium side once History Collection drops. So yeah, if you guys like this video, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think of the tier list. It's probably very, very biased. So, you know, don't take this as gospel. This is just my thoughts on what it is. And yeah, leave a comment down below what you guys think. If you haven't subscribed already, press subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.